Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We're back. We have some games to discuss over the weekend, the sort of evolving playoff race in the East and the West. But we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, we're in day 7 of the hostage crisis. That's Aaron Rodgers with holding the Jets and the Green Bay Packers hostage. Although 2 months ago, Aaron Rodgers said he wouldn't do that to the Packers. He's indeed doing that because free agency has opened. I wrote about this problem in February. I could see the way this was sort of shaping up then, how he was going to be the first choice of the Jets and everybody else will be the second, third, or whatever, and they'll start going to other places. Even if they get him now, he's already putting them behind the 8 ball as far as speaking to other players for what they might be able to sign in free agency. So as somebody who decided to go on my Twitter account and say, hey, that thing that Aaron Rodgers went to, that was a charity flag football event. It's not like he's I'm not going to use the word, or a bad guy. And I'm like, I'm not telling you he's a bad human. I'm telling you he's a selfish guy. And he's a selfish guy. This is the move of a selfish guy. This is a guy now holding up 2 organizations and free agency's open. So, at this point, it's partially on the Jets, too, because they should have set a limit. I said that they definitely should have set a drop-dead date. They clearly didn't. And you get what you get now.
Yeah. The only thing I would say in his defense, and it's a pretty weak defense, but, it is difficult. I'm sure you've been through it, Russ and Mike, both of you. I know I have, where you have to make a decision on a job, and it's never easy, especially in his situation. So I'm sure it's not as cut and dry as we want to make it out to be. Anybody who's been faced with a couple of options and trying to decide what's best.
But he has millions of dollars to make it an easier transition.
Yeah, but I don't think it's about the money. Yeah.
No. I mean, if you have to uproot your life.
Well, Russ, but Russ, what is being reported out there, and it may be erroneous, but that he is trying to leverage the Jets to bring some of the guys that he has had in Green Bay, like Randall Cobb and his buddies.
That is not really. I don't believe that's the case.
Okay,
yeah.
well, that was out there.
But it's still, it's still a big change. Just trying to decide what to do now. The Jets have got to just lay down the law. So,
sure.
That's
the thing. But, I have just a little bit of sympathy for, trying to decide, what to do next, which, always causes all consternation. So, I've got just a small subject. I don't want to get too far into it because it's not sports, but I watched the Oscars last night, and I was amused by the fact that as the years go on, I've seen less and less of the movies. I'm pretty typical of most Americans, where I used to see a lot of movies, and now I see fewer and fewer. But I had seen a couple. I
saw one. I didn't watch the Oscars, knowing that I've only seen one that was.
Yeah, I saw just recently All Quiet on the Western Front, although I bailed early because those of you who know the story, I read that book when I was very young.
I read it in college. I read it in high school. Yeah, I saw the movie from the 1930s in a film class. Yeah, so. Yeah,
me too. Well, my only point in all that was going to be that, if you've read the book, and I read it, I don't know, I must have been 14, something like that. They were way ahead of their time. They were HBO-ish, the writer was, and the fact that he killed off main characters. That didn't happen. When I was 14 reading books, main characters didn't get killed off. Right. But they certainly do in All Quiet on the Western Front. Anyway, so I didn't finish that book. But what I want to say about the Oscars is this is one of the first years where I actually enjoyed the program. And I think it was because everybody seemed organized in their thinking on the acceptance speeches.
Yes.
Like people got on, they had a take, they said their take, and they got off, like Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh, she was great.
Yeah, and I did appreciate the fact that she was she won as a mainstream actor. I mean, this film obviously was very unique. That's why I won, but she is, she's done a lot of films that people just like. They're not Academy Award worthy. She's done a lot of horror films, obviously, and all that kind of stuff. So it was fun to see her win. But, everybody that won came up. They said their piece. I liked that Navalny's documentary one. That was just kind of interesting. So even though I hadn't seen the movies, I probably enjoyed the Oscars better than I usually do.
I think there was a conscious effort, Kev, after maybe the biggest black mark in Oscar history, the Will Smith slap on Chris Rock, to streamline things and to make things more likable, because the industry took a big hit because of that. Now I'll say this is like the only one that I thought, and I didn't watch the whole thing. I missed the Jamie Lee Curtis acceptance speech, but then I went back and watched it on Twitter. It was a video clip on Twitter. The only one that I thought sort of like lost track of time was Brendan Fraser, but I'll cut him some slack because
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean,
Yeah, he's never been nominated before. He's probably never going to get nominated again. Now, I didn't see The Whale, but apparently it was an unbelievable performance. But I think I've seen two movies. I saw Top Gun Maverick, which I was rooting for, and one other movie, and that was about it. So
I saw 1.5 because I bailed on Top Gun Maverick. So I did see that and Black Panther. After like 15 minutes, I bailed.
You're lame to dump on Top Gun Maverick. Come on.
I didn't dump.
I'm with Mike on that. That's
way too predictable. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not really, but okay. Anyway. All right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, March 13th, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen, and I value my time.
I'm Kevin Allen. I don't even know how to react to that because that really isn't true.
And
anybody that knows how much sports Russ watches knows that isn't remotely true.
And I'm Mike Lagello, and I don't value Russ's time, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.
Nobody on this panel can be accused of valuing.
Oh my God, that was great.
Their time.
Okay, let's start the show with this, and I recommend to everybody who wants sort of the down low and the 411 on the Philadelphia Flyers situation to listen to our Off the Post podcast on Sunday. We had Giannahan and Olivier Reiner, two Philadelphia Inquirer, is it, reporters, yes. Who covered the team, and with Anthony and Russ. I was the only one who's not on the Philly beat, and they provided a lot of insight on the situation right after Danny Briere's press conference yesterday. But Kev, I wanted to get your impression on this, because what has come out of that presser is that the Flyers are finally going to embrace the Mike Agello model and rebuild. Now, they're not going to tear down. They're not going to rip it to shreds. They're going to evaluate. I think that's more to preserve the value of some of the players, rather than saying we're going to have a fire sale and dump.
Well, they can't trade some of them, Mike. That's
it's not about the fire sale. They just simply can't move.
Right. But
a lot of the contracts, but
color me skeptical about them doing a rebuild in the sense that I perceive. But what are your thoughts on what Briere said?
Well, I mean, I think it was important that he used the Sam Kerchide said the R word. I think that was really important, and I'm sure he got that message from above. It's a realistic approach. In terms of you can't just strip it down to the chassis. It's never that easy, because they have too many contracts that they've got to deal with. So they're going to have to sort of do it in layers, and it's going to take some time. But, the warning that I would have for Philadelphia fans is what we've learned about the tank model, or the let's get bad so we can get good, is nobody's done it yet. You look at, Detroit is fully invested in that, and they're moving into 7 years without and Yzerman has done it right. Like, you look at his draft picks, he's hit on his first round picks. But he is even starting to say, and it's something we've all known, but we don't talk about, you got to be bad at the right time. In other words, you got to be lucky. So it isn't as easy. I would say Philadelphia has a little bit of leg up because I thought they hit a home run last year with their draft pick. I think he's going to be a really good player, Cutter Gauthier. But I really like that. I have been hearing skepticism around the league that Danny Briere is going to end up as the GM.
Sure. And so on Off the Post, Olivia Reiner actually said, as far as she's been told from a source, he is not a lock, even though others have supposed that he is a lock. And so, Kev, here was my take. Like in the business world, if you're a CEO and you're taking over a company, even if you're doing it midstream, and I've worked in companies where all of a sudden there's a new CEO in town, you should lay out a message and a plan. And Danny only did part of that. He only said we're going to rebuild and they're evaluating. He didn't really go into anything. He wouldn't talk about any players. He didn't really, and he's been doing this for a year. He should have laid out more of a plan because it's hard for fans to follow and believe without that. And if that were a CEO for a major company, the stock would have gone down just because everybody would be like, wow, this is like in a state of flux. And the Flyers are still in a state of flux because you don't know if he is a full-time GM. You have a coach that knows he's not a full-time GM. He holds the hammer. He's got 3 more years making a lot of money. He'll make more the next GM. And so how is that going to work out? You don't know who's coming in the front office. It's supposed that the drafting is going to stay the same. And while Cutter Gauthier was a nice pick, I thought Juracek would have been a grand slam for them. While Cutter Gauthier is a home run, I agree, a really good pick. They also haven't had the greatest drafting. So and they endorsed the drafting and in that press conference. So there were some things there that still leaves you wondering.
Well, okay, Kev, let me ask you this because, and I'm not saying that you're wrong and the sources that are telling you this are wrong, but if the Flyers, I mean, okay, if you go out and say he's the interim GM at this point, what is he going to do between now and the end of the season to prove that he is worthy of being a GM? It's like there's nothing really to do other than to sign college free agents and maybe get a contract of a player whose deal is up at the end of the year. I mean, I don't see how he proves that he's worthy of the job between now and when other people would be available.
Yeah, exactly. That was what I was going to say when we continued on with my Briere situation. People don't have any idea what's going to happen in Philadelphia, but they're all speculating based on the fact that he really can't do much
right.
to improve, that he's more of a caretaker. Now, we don't know that for sure, but that's what people are speculating just for the reasons that you said. And the draft, like how much influence can he have at the draft? That he can run out and look at the top prospects, but the GM only makes one pick, the first one, and then they turn it over to their scouting staff. So, he's not going to be able really to do much other than establish a presence and aura, a kind of a face of the franchise, try to win over the fans the best he can with, meeting with the media and so forth. But, here was
the other thing, Kev, and I'll have you respond to it. So Sam Carchidi did bring up the question, hey, what if after all this, they offered you a team president spot? And he said, I hadn't thought about it. I'd like to be a GM, but he didn't close it off to that. But he doesn't have to be team president either. There's a million things he could be called in hockey ops. And he could be transitioning to another job if there's a guy out there that they believe is better in the job.
Yeah,
I think that still exists.
But Russ, I mean, the way things, and I said this on Off the Post, the way things are being set up now in the NHL with a team president who's actually the general manager and a general manager who's actually the.
They don't have to do it that way. That's
but everybody seems to be doing it. I mean, that's
not everybody. It's not everybody. I think.
No, I mean,
it's not everybody.
It's pretty clear that the Pittsburgh Penguins aren't doing it the way you described because so. But
I'm just saying, like Vancouver's doing it with Rutherford and Alvin. Montreal's doing it with Gorton and Hughes. I think a lot of the new setups are doing it that way. There's a stratification of management, of hierarchy, And, you know, maybe in the end they don't do that. But Kev, the interesting thing is the names that are, and we won't find this out probably until the end of the season, but the names that are coming out potentially as team presidents. Ray Shiro's name has been mentioned. Chris Pronger's name has been mentioned. Eric Lindros, Robert Esch, Ray Whitney, like all these names. I mean, I don't know if any of them are realistic, but if they go to Shiro, that just smacks to me of that's the old boy Flyers network. Let's get Freddie the Fog's son in there.
I don't think that's true. I mean, Shiro's a pretty modern approach.
Sure.
To managerial. So, I mean, just the name is old school, but, you know, there's nothing wrong with having a connection that fans can relate to. But, you know, I think that's another reason why around the league people are skeptical that Briere will end up the guy, because there are going to be a lot of quality options out there. Right. Flyers are.
This could be their way of keeping the options open.
This is a premier job, is what you're saying.
That's exactly right. It's like, you know, I mean, you know, I think Eklund has used this, but I've heard it elsewhere. You know, the original 12. You know, Philadelphia is one of those franchises where, you know, you want to be a part of it. There's a tradition there. You know, the fan base is strong.
And I'll put out a name here. This is a guess. I have no source on this, and I don't know what his situation is with his current team. But Brian Burke was hired by the ownership group in Pittsburgh before Fenway took control. He is team president in Pittsburgh. He originated in the Philadelphia organization as a player. He played for the Maine Mariners. That is a primo job. I just have a weird feeling if Burke is available in the summer, that might be a guy that sort of fits in Philadelphia. It's just a guess for me. Nobody has told me this, but he sort of fits it for us. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think there's truth to that. I also do want to point out for the doubters of the, you know, Hextall Granlund deal. Do you see how Jason Zucker's scoring? And I talked about Jason Zucker and Granlund. Yeah, I think that's what they were looking for. Anyhow, Burke has been quiet. Would he want something this big on his plate now? I don't know. I think that's why he took the dual thing in Pittsburgh. That's the only thing I would say is I don't know if he wants that kind of responsibility anymore.
Yeah, the only thing is, you know, when you get a rebuilding team, you're buying a lot of years, you know, because it's, you know, you got to get your, you know, 4 or 5 years before people are saying, well, like, where's it at? You know, only now in Detroit are the natives getting just a little restless.
Right.
And, you know, this is year 7 of the rebuild. So
that's why I think you do need to have someone younger. It's no offense to Brian Burke, but Kevin's illustrating is right. I think you do need to have someone younger. That's why, again, I brought up this, Kev. If Kyle Dubas were to get, you know, the Leafs get eliminated, Kyle Dubas gets fired. If he has interest in the Philly job, I got to believe they're going to talk to him.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, because Pierre LeBrun wrote something for The Athletic that I thought was pretty good in terms of general managers, 2 general managers specifically who are lame ducks. One is Dubas. The other one is Brad Treliving in Calgary, and how they might be sort of summer free agents of in management if things go the right way. Now, I have been told by people who know that if the Leafs win a round, and maybe even if they don't win a round, that Dubas will be re-signed. I'm a little skeptical of that because the ownership of the Leafs is TSN and Sportsnet, and they have a lot invested in the Leafs advancing, you know, in terms of product, in terms of advertising and things of that nature. And if they don't advance 7 years in a row, then they're probably going to think that things need to be changed. But if things need to be changed in Toronto, just like in Philadelphia, Kev, we don't know who the potential targets in terms of a general manager are there, and that's a more primo job than Philadelphia.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's bigger than Philadelphia job, but yeah, I mean they'll be coming out of the woodwork for that. Yeah. So there'll be some quality people.
So let's take anything in sports. Like he has an interim tag. That's it. And when you have an interim tag, nothing is definite.
True. Very true. All right, let's talk about some of the teams and the games and the standings and the playoff race. And Kev, I know you wanted to talk about the.
I do. I just been thinking a lot about the Devils. I don't want to talk about yesterday's game, but that was the certainly what prompted me to think about this. Like, I wonder if we're not giving the Devils enough credit for who they've become. I know I'm guilty of that because I see them as kind of a nouveau arrival. Therefore, they've got to almost pay their dues. They've got to go. I've always been taught, from guys that have been around forever, you got to lose in the playoffs before you can figure out how to win. So, I kind of think, well, yeah, I just don't know. And, and we say things, the cliches, well, is their goaltending good enough? And, all that kind of stuff. Well, I've learned over the last few years because there's a lot of discussion about underlying numbers. Coaches say that here in Detroit, it gets talked about a lot, underlying numbers. And so I started looking at some things, and it really shocked me, like how really good the Devils have been this year, especially with things like scoring chances. They are number one in the league in scoring chances. They are number two in the league for giving up the fewest number of scoring chances. Like, that is remarkable. I never would have guessed that because what you hear about is, well, their goaltending isn't good enough, right, and their defense could use a little help. Well, maybe their goaltending doesn't have to be good enough, although I want to talk about that in a little bit too. But if they're not giving up a lot of chances, because the other team that is like that, of course, is Carolina, except they don't get as many scoring chances as the Devils do.
No,
here's what I could add. Early in the season, I definitely was guilty of what you're talking about. Last week, I had a hand in an assignment as part of like a group assignment of who would I vote for GM of the year. I put Tom Fitzgerald.
Okay.
And I laid out why. I said they've had ups and downs with the coaching. You thought Lindy was going. He wasn't going. Problems with the assistant coach, goaltending issues, injuries, and they've overcome it all. And so there's no question there for real. They're still going to have to get past the Rangers. I mean, that's gonna be their big test. Like that's
although Russ,
unless they win the division, but I don't know if they're gonna.
Right. Yeah,
and that's not believing. That's not believing them. That's saying this is the worst that the Hurricanes have played all year. I don't think they're going to continue. That's
and the Hurricanes are on their third goalie because Kochikov played yesterday. But Kev, going to the goaltending, and I just looked it up because I'm a little surprised. I mean, Vanacek's numbers in terms of save percentage are about average, 910, but 2.48
goals. That's above average, but yeah.
That was slightly above. It's like 907, 908, I think is league average.
But that's, that two,
that matters. That two things matter.
Yeah, that does matter. But
he's 28-7-3, which is an unbelievable record.
Yeah, and the other thing about him, you go into like icy data, and you start looking at like he's a plus goalie in terms of goals prevented above average. Mm-hmm. And probably he would be better. He's had some stinkers, and then that has brought him down. But he's plus. He's down in there in the vicinity of Shesterkin, who everybody has said has had an inferior year, but we don't think less of the Rangers because we just figure, well, Shesterkin can turn it on. Well, maybe Vanacek, could be, the modern version of John Casey, who can just get hot. And, he had just recently, he had kind of a bad run, but in the last few games, he's been very good. And of course, there's other elements in play here, like Dougie Hamilton has had just an incredibly strong year.
Yeah.
And they have 8 to 10 goal scorers. They've got 4 20-goal scorers. They've have guys on the rise, guys that are getting better, each game. They've had surprises. I just think, I listened to what Russ said about the Rangers, but, you can say that about every matchup. Mike's worried about the Tampa Bay Lightning. Well, everybody I know has some matchup that they're going, oh, man.
I'll say it like this, Kev. There's better matchups for the Devils than the Rangers.
Yeah. Okay. And just to, as the cherry on top of the sundae, and I know that, Russ, and as I am, are big fans of Jack Hughes. he's got 37 goals. He's going to score 40. Maybe has an outside shot of scoring 50, and he's missed 4 or 5 games. Their success or failure in the playoffs is going to ride on Jack Hughes, A, staying healthy, and B, being able to create offense for a team that, I think Meyer being added helps them offensively.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on their secondary offense, but they do have guys who are able to produce.
You go around and look at the number of teams that have 8, 10 or more goal scorers, and the Devils are right up there.
Yeah, Dawson Mercer is pretty damn good secondary offense.
Yeah, well, he's almost a primary guy now.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, they really do just create a lot of offense, and they're better defensively, at least in terms of preventing chances than we thought they were. And I just think they're there, and so I don't know. I mean, the one thing that I've said for the last few years is everything I've learned about the game doesn't seem to be true anymore. Mm-hmm. We've seen teams that have not had success before suddenly get good in the postseason, and we've had unusual things happen that we don't normally count on. So I guess my only point is I have no idea they're going to make a run. Maybe they'll get knocked off in the first round because 8 teams, good teams, are going to do that in the first round. But I just think it's time for us to acknowledge that they're right there and not immediately dismiss them as well. They're new to this status, so therefore
there's something else too that's going on. There's a change in the Devils, and the changes in Jack Hughes. He is now tenacious defensively too, and he's not getting any credit for that. Like, yes, his offensive numbers are tremendous. I wrote that article about skating. He's one of the 3 best skaters in the league, but he's also good defensively now, and he wasn't at the start of his career.
No, he wasn't. I think what he's doing now, Russ, is similar to what Mitch Marner does in Toronto. His anticipation is fantastic, and he's able to anticipate passes or something, block shots with his stick and go the other way.
Some pucks now too, which he wasn't ever doing.
Yeah, he the first goal the Devils got in the game against Carolina, the broadcast referred to it, which I enjoyed. The one-man forecheck. Yeah, he went in, essentially picked the pocket of the puck carrier and scored a goal.
Now, I'll give you, and I watched almost all of the game yesterday between Winnipeg and Tampa Bay. And honestly, Linus Ullmark is going to win the Vezina. No doubt in my mind with the numbers that he's put up. But Connor Hellebuyck is going to get nominated for the Vezina. He deserves to. He played back-to-back games against Florida and Tampa on the weekend. They won both of them. He was a one-man wrecking crew against the Lightning. They won, I think it was 3-2. Winnipeg, there was an outside chance that Calgary was going to catch them in the West for the wild card spot. Now they're in 3rd place, 1 point ahead of Colorado. Colorado's got a lot of games in hand, but I don't see Nashville or Calgary catching Winnipeg. It's 6 points right now. And that's within range, but the way Winnipeg is playing, the way Hellebuck's playing, I don't know if they'll catch him.
Yeah, I mean, Hellebuyck has had a tremendous season, although I don't know that anybody is going to be wrestle that away. No. You got to have 2 other finalists, I guess, would just be my take on that. And he's certainly among those. And Winnipeg has been surprisingly good this season, better than expected. But he's a lot of that. Mm-hmm. I think if you start looking around about who's goalie dependent, I'm going to put the Jets up there in that category.
Yeah, they are. There's no question they are.
Very much so.
Although we do have to point out one thing.
Yeah.
And I was skeptical when they made the trade because I didn't see it, but the maturation of Neil Pionk as an actual true top pairing defenseman has really happened. And I didn't see that coming. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. So that's something where they've really benefited from that. And
he had to step into the breach because Morrissey got hurt. It's not a long-term injury, but Pionk was point guy on their power play, and usually Morrissey is. Now, we have to give credit to Ack because Jonathan Quick is 3-0 in Vegas since the trade. So, Kev, this is an example of an old guy being motivated to stick it to the old team that traded him, and right now he's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting the job done. There's no doubt. And, we've seen that happen before. Everybody's got it in them to, step up. And, it's undoubtedly a motivation. And you think he's not looking at the possibility that, he would get to play against his team. I'm going to be curious when or if, because we have no idea whether Logan Thompson will be back. What happens then?
He's supposed to be. And look, and I've seen Yuri Patera play at different levels, USHL and otherwise, have written about him. He's a pretty good goalie too. So if they had to go with this, it's okay. But Jonathan Quick's not winning a Stanley Cup.
Hill, Brasso, Thompson.
Yeah, it's a problem though.
I mean, gee, they got how many goalies can you have?
You don't have any if you're going into the playoffs worrying about it. Which of the three are you playing?
I mean, okay, I may be assuming a lot here, but honestly, if it's game one of the playoffs and everybody's healthy, I think they're going with Jonathan Quick.
I mean, they might, but again, I still don't think this is getting them to the Stanley Cup. They're a good team. They're deficient in some areas. They score a lot, but
I would agree with you, Mike, provided that Logan Thompson just came back, and right. But if Thompson comes back like next week and is really, really sharp and looks good, I think they'll go with him because he's their guy moving forward. They've signed him, so.
But if Quick goes 8-1 down the stretch, or
I mean, it would be a Fleury situation where. You would just, kind of go with him.
Now, I do want to mention one thing, Mike, before we, in the chat room, I want to say, let's see, I'm going to find the person here. It's hard to sometimes scroll, but in the chat room, somebody is saying, like, here we go. GSM, Lafreniere may not be a bust, but he's getting close to being one. So is Kaka. Well, here's the thing. If you do watch Ranger games, and I'm not sure if you do or you don't, he's a half a point a game. He's got 14 goals, so he may get 20 goals. He's a plus player. He's got 124 hits. He's starting to get power play time now, second half of the year. He's really been in on a lot of scoring chances. If that's your definition of a bust, I think you don't know what the definition of a bust is. I just have to say that.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
He's 21.
Everybody's expecting a first overall pick to just jump. Everybody expects out of a first overall pick to be McDavid, to be Matthews. But okay, Jack Hughes took a couple years to really get to where he is, and now look at the player that he is. I mean, and Lafreniere is in a situation where he's not
going to be Jack Hughes either. He's not.
Right, but he could be a 30, 35 goal scorer, a 70-point winger. I mean, I think that's very, I mean, Kako is a second overall pick. I mean, I'm not ready to bury these guys, Kevin. I understand the assumption of people out there that if a guy is a first overall pick, they automatically he's going to be a linchpin number one center or a power forward winger or something like that. And sometimes they're just good players, but they don't make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the draft year of how good the upper echelon talent is. But and I also think I think hardcore hockey fans sort of get it, that it takes a while. I've seen the Rangers play several times this season, and I think Lafreniere has had an okay season.
Yeah, he has.
He's involved. You notice him out on shifts, and he probably will end up with 20 goals or close to it. So that's pretty good.
So Russ, I know that the Rangers got 3 of a possible 4 points this weekend, and overtime win over the Sabres, and then it was an overtime loss or was it shootout loss against the Pittsburgh?
Overtime.
Okay, I saw some of the game, but not all of it. But 3 of a possible 4 points. They're seemingly locked into third place, so that's Carolina or New Jersey in the first round. But I know that through our discussions over the weekend, you're still not happy with where the Rangers are at and Patrick Kane sort of fitting into the overall dynamic of the team.
Yeah, I think now you have a pretty good idea of what Patrick Kane is. And look, he's got like 3 points in 4 games, but there's a lot of goals being given up when he's out there too. And if the Rangers don't have an answer for that, they've got to cut his time on the ice. I'm sorry. You can't have Patrick Kane out there for 20 minutes if you're going to give up a goal and a half a game when he's out there, even if he's getting a point a game. That's what they're going to have to come to grips to. That's what I've been talking about all along. That is still one of the battles. One of the other battles that's interesting, Larry Brooks brought it to light, and that is he said the goalies, and then Vince also covers the team. He brought out that a lot of players lately have not been coming out to speak after games.
Mm.
So I was sort of schooling the fans, as Kevin Allen would know, on what is policy, and teams have to have a minimum amount of players that come out, have to come out after a game, have to come out after practice. If it's playoffs, have to come out on off days, those kinds of things.
Right.
Larry wasn't wrong saying that it's unusual that the goalies haven't spoken in a long time, because they're like starting pitchers. 99% of the time, the goalie who starts that game is usually speaking, unless they're in the training room or injured or something like that, or really super mad, which doesn't happen often. So to me, there's something else going on there too, Kev, whether they're banding against the media or, they don't like what's been written. I don't know, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it does. I mean, really players should be available after the game. The rules spell it out, but it's sort of devolved over the last 5 or 6 years, where they don't have. I mean, they just had the problem in Edmonton, and Mark Spector pointed out they had asked for 2 young defensemen who had made mistakes, because they send around a list of who do you want to talk to, and they didn't make those players available. They brought up veterans instead, and that's clearly an attempt to shield the young players from. But I think you learn. I think you learn by facing the music. And I've met young players who wanted to talk about it and to come out and sort of explain what happened and just say, I just feel horrible about it, but I'm trying to learn from my mistakes. I know I'm going to make mistakes. So I think it's a chance for them to learn. And when you shelter them, that just makes it worse, because now what you're saying is this is so big that you can't deal with it. So,
right. Well, I mean, part of PR's job is to shield players. I know Joe Yerdon talked about it last week.
Yeah, but when did that happen? Because they used to be a facilitator. When I first started, they were facilitators of interviews.
Being a gatekeeper isn't necessarily the job of public relations.
No.
Yeah, well, it is now, but I'd like to know what happened. Was it like a Tuesday and PR classes around the world where everybody said, let's be impediments instead of facilitators?
I think it started before, but I think that the pandemic and the fact that they could control the message via Zoom interviews, and now they've gotten used to being able to sort of spoon feed what they want to spoon feed to the media by, limiting access. I mean, it's getting back there to the way it was, but I don't think it's ever going to get back to exactly the way it was. And I think teams are just going to, they'll give you 2 or 3 players, they'll give them to you at the podium, but going into the locker room for a lot of places it still isn't happening. In Buffalo, it's happening. In Toronto, it's happening. I think it's happening in Philadelphia, but there's places it's not.
Yeah. Well, in Detroit, you do your best work at the morning skates and in the practice, because that's when the locker rooms are fully open. And I'll give the Red Wings some credit. A lot of them just hang out by their cubicles. It's a beautiful dressing room they have, and so they just hang out. They chat amongst themselves, and so you can find 10 or 12 Red Wings after a practice just sitting around. So that's always helpful.
Now, swinging to the east here, and I wanted to, there was a home and home with the Red Wings and the Bruins. Bruins came back from a 2-0 deficit to win 3-2 on Saturday. On Sunday, the Wings responded with a 5-3 victory over the Bruins in Detroit. Kev, right now, the Bruins look like just a complete machine. They're going to run away. They're running away with it. They're running away with the President's Trophy. They have a goal differential of plus 102 or 103. But the only concern right now is whether they've not peaked, because they've been this good all year, but whether this can be maintained going into the playoffs. Because right now you're in the dog days, and they almost act like now they're a little bored because they lost that game to Edmonton when they were leading 2-0. It's natural probably to get a little complacent, but whether they can sort of kick it back into gear when the time is right.
Yeah, I mean, that's been a thing that we've kicked around through the years about, whether teams get bored and whether they need the playoffs, because, winning, if it's I don't know that it ever gets boring, but it gets repetitive. And but what I think happens too is when you've been as good as the Bruins have, when things kind of go wrong, it's not like they're inexperienced, but all of a sudden they're having to play a little different than they've been playing. And I saw that a little bit with the Red Wings. That
was good. I mean, I saw the third period of that game, and the Red Wings played that right. They played
did.
tough. They used their size to their advantage. Sider was giving them fits.
It was
that kind of stuff is good.
The Red Wings take and all that wasn't quite the same as yours, but they're not even close, and they know it, and they'll talk about it to being able to deal physically.
I just watched the third period. I didn't watch anything else.
No, that's what, just even in the third period.
Okay.
Like Dylan Larkin said, and also Malone said, we got a long way to go in that regard. That is their Achilles heel. You certainly honed in on that. The Bruins are just more physical. They're just tougher now. Sider stood up. A couple of guys did stand up. They fought back as hard as they can.
Yeah, Larkin was going with I can't remember who. Even when the game ended, he was doing that.
Yeah, they did. And Larkin brought that up last year. If you remember, I talked about that a couple of times where it was almost like he sent a message to management. He said basically, we're not physical enough to compete with the physical teams. The bigger teams are giving them all kinds of trouble, and the Bruins did too. Now, in that particular game, they stood up well defensively as well, and that they were able to hold that lead, which they weren't able to do the day before. But here's just an odd thing that I'm going to throw out there, and I really wanted to talk about this more than we're going to be able to, but just because I think it's fascinating. Over the weekend, I read, first of all, I saw Marchand play 2 games. And in Detroit, he got booed because the week before he said nobody wants to go to Detroit for an All-Star game.
Right.
Now, yesterday I read that he was mixing it up again with Bissonnette. And it occurred to me, given the fact that there's so much repetition going on now and there's not much for the Bruins to play for, I think Marchand keeps it lively. Yeah. I mean, I just think that his teammates are amused by some of the things.
I think you don't worry about Marchand because he's proven the winning before, Kev. But if this were another team, they might be concerned about their guy. But this is how Marchand kind of builds himself up. I agree.
And I think his teammates respond favorably to that. I think they get they shake their head and and then they they talk amongst. I mean, I've never witnessed this, but I can just hear them looking. Did you hear what Brad said yesterday?
He has the gravitas to say whatever he wants within reason because he's one of the best players in the league. I mean, he was talking shade about Edmonton when they went into Edmonton a couple weeks ago. He said what he said about Detroit when he was in Toronto. He said some humorous things about of Corey. They'll be available in May because they lose in the play or something like that, and then made jabbed at Mitch Marner for something. So that's just he likes to wear the black hat, and maybe that's a good thing with everybody with pucks in deep and all the boring stuff to have somebody who says something that's actually interesting every once in a while.
Well, here's what it is. I'm going to read what he said. It actually is funny. He did this in an in-game interview to have fun with Paul Bissonnette. He asked if he was a little hungover right now or what. And then, they said it was his birthday and he goes, oh, was it? He goes, 50 comes quick. And he knows he's not 50. So that's pretty funny.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's always got something to say, and he's a really good player. I think as long as he doesn't do the stupid things on the ice,
like
the licking.
I think when the teammates don't like it, but I do think they don't mind his mouth. I think that his mouth keeps it interesting for him, and he's acknowledged that he does this to get a rise out of people. And, like he's not just being irresponsible just because he doesn't know any better. It's all calculated. He knows what he's doing.
I think there's room in this game for the antagonist, for the rat. I mean, Linsman back in the day with the Flyers, that was his call to action. Nazem Kadri when he was at Toronto, and still to this day with Calgary is the same way. I know that on Saturday, Kev, Michael Bunting got involved with Evander Kane. And it was basically a wrestling match all down the ice. And then Kane, after the game, says, well, he's a diver, he's an embellisher, he's this and that. And, Bunting didn't want to do battle with Kane in the media. But there's Brendan Gallagher in Montreal. There is a place and there is a value for players like that in this game. I think that, I like Bunting and the way he plays, and the Leafs, I think, are probably, depending on where their management goes, probably sign him to a long-term extension. And his teammates love him because he stirs it up on the ice.
I want to mention one thing, and maybe Kev could even expand on it. Something that I've noticed that's going on right now in the game, which is good. It's much like when we go to concerts and the cheap seats sell first. And so the cheap seats sell first, and then, what's left of the seats on the floor for $400 now, and stuff in the middle for $200, and the cheap seats now are like $140 when you're done with taxes. But getting past that, because I recently paid that for Peter Gabriel.
I wouldn't. I'm not. I wasn't.
But here's what I want to say: the Predators just inked Jankowski to a 1-year deal for $775. Very smart. We're seeing 3 or 4 of these players now, 1-year guys that fit in their thing, that used to have to sweat it out. And they're signing them quick, and I think they know that because the cap's not going up much, and they're heading into a GM meeting, which they could hear some bad news about the regional sports network problem. That is a problem, and I think they're smart, Kevin. They're signing up a lot of these guys quick before they even get hit the market.
Yeah, I mean, I talked last month about the fact that that GMs now sort of just count on the fact they're going to have 7 or 8 guys that are minimum wage, and then your cap is really $7 million less than it is for 16 guys, because 7 guys are going to be below because you're planning on that. But now I'm talking to guys and saying, then we maybe have 8 guys now like that, or so we're still going to spend a lot of money, but there's going to be more guys down at the bottom that are going to be the minimum wage guy. Now, if you think about that, if you're getting up to 8, now you're starting to get into the meat of your lineup. Like you've got third line guys that you're gonna put on there. It's not just your fourth line and your bottom 2 defensemen. You're trying to so that would be 5. So you got to get into your third line if you're hoping to get 7 or 8 guys. And when I say minimum wage guys, I'm talking about guys that are in the 1.2 and down range, or 1.3 maybe even and down. So.
Well, it was interesting over the last couple of days. You saw Washington sort of being continuing to be proactive like they were when they signed Sherry, when they signed Dylan Strome. They signed Nick Jensen to a 3-year deal for a little over $4 million. Now this weekend they signed Trevor Van Riemsdyk for 3 years at $3 million. Not big money, but they had an entire defense in unrestricted free agents like Orlov. Yeah. And they said, okay, this is what we're going to offer. If you take the deal, fine. If you don't take the deal, we're going to trade you. And 2 of them took the deal. So now they have 2 of their UFAs locked up.
I'm going to say something that I don't feel is crazy in my mind. I think they upgraded when they got Sandin and lost Orlov. Orlov is fine, right, but I think Orlov is, getting close to running out of time in this league.
Well, he's playing great in Boston.
I know everybody's going to play great in Boston.
Yeah, and okay, I like Rasmus Sandin. I think he's a good young player. I sort of understand why the Leafs traded him, because they were going to have to pay him in a year, and they have too many of the same type of defensemen, and they needed a guy like Jake McCabe, who's played really well since they traded for him. But I think Sandin's going to be a 50 to 55 point defenseman.
Yeah, me too. And that's the thing. Orlov, I think, is starting to trend away from that. He'll look good in Boston. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a good fit. But if he were to play, if Orlov were to play on a middle of the road team like what the Capitals are, he doesn't look the same.
I had yesterday. I had a NHL person who has seen Colorado quite a bit tell me that JT Compher is playing every bit as good as Rodgers was playing.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is what I've been telling Mike for a while. But
you were the first to point it out on the show. You thought he was going to be fine.
Yeah.
And he has been. So
And Evan Rodriguez has played pretty decently.
He has.
Also,
I'm telling you, Colorado, this is the mistake we're all making. We're all focused
they're
on
lying
the
in the
East.
weeds. They're lying in the weeds.
They are. Everybody is fighting it out in the East, and Colorado's just getting healthy. They're still the champs, but they can still have a long run here.
But
and they're going to get to somebody's going to get the disadvantage of having to play them in the first round.
Yeah, but the key is Landeskog. They got to get Landeskog back. Now, just to finish off here, Kev, in watching that game against with Winnipeg against Tampa Bay, and also watching them against Vegas earlier in the week, there is something missing there. Now they got a big scare. Stamkos got hurt. He came back and played yesterday. They beat the Hawks on Saturday. They lost to Winnipeg on Sunday. But I'm watching this, and maybe it's boredom. Maybe it's the fact that they're just playing out the string, and they know they're in third place, and they're going to play Toronto. They're only 4 points behind them, but now Toronto's got 2 games in hand. But right now, there looks like there's something missing. But I'm not about to say Toronto's got them, because Toronto doesn't have them.
Well, the same guy that told me about Comfer also said he has seen Tampa Bay a couple of times and says something's wrong there. And he goes, and Cooper knows it. Cooper knows it's wrong, and they're trying to address it, but defensively they're not the same. Offensively, they just don't seem to have the same spark. So I think they're fooling around with the lines a little bit, but
they should rest Vasilevsky a little bit too. They really should. I know he doesn't like it, but they should.
The guy that they should rest, Russ, is Hedman, because this is their defense right now. Sergachev, Hedman, Cole, Perbix, and Zach Bogosian. I'm missing one guy, but so I mean, their defense is missing McDonough
and Ruta. They're missing Ruta.
Ruta has really hurt them.
Well, there's no question their defense is not as good as it's been over the past 3 years. There's no doubt.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. That's a worry.
And the rumor was at the deadline they were trying to get Edmondson from Montreal. They couldn't make the money work. They were trying to get Radko Gudas from Florida, but Florida, probably wisely thought that
Florida wasn't going to help them, really. I mean,
well, Gudas might help them a little bit.
Florida's not going to help out Tampa. What's their motivation to do that?
At that point, Florida may have been selling Russ. Now all of a sudden they've turned it around and they have a chance to make the playoffs. So they clearly were looking to bolster their defense and couldn't do it because they don't have enough assets to trade, or they didn't have enough cap room. So I'm saying that they look vulnerable, but I don't, like they're lying in a wounded animal is always the most dangerous. Mm-hmm. That's all I'll say. Okay. Great show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.